You know why it's not first degree, yes? And you knows why it wouldn't be first degree.
Wasn't premeditated.
That's not premeditated. It wasn't done in conjunction with another crime. But a lot of times, what police officers see and prosecutors go along with what is obvious. Never asking the questions behind it. Could this in fact have been some other type of a killing? Is the defendant actually telling the truth? If a criminalist, somebody working in the crime lab, is not asked that question, and by the way, you know what questions are asked? Was the shotgun working properly? Would it go off unintentionally? Could it have caused these wounds? Never asked to reconstruct the facts of the case to say, is that story true? And if it is, perhaps we need to charge this in a different way. I took them in consideration along with the physical evidence and said, does every element comport with her statement? Let me tell you something from CSI that I really like and have done in my career, but I find that most forensic scientists don't do. You know when he's talking about looking at the wounds, then they do a picture, they show how somebody is hitting somebody or shooting somebody as you hear the voiceover reconstructing it. I always try to imagine how a wound got on somebody's head or how they got shot, trying to picture it in my mind, like running the film backwards and taking a look at that. I tried to visualize the evidence. So if I saw a bullet that was flattened on the front, what might you think? What do you think?
No idea.
It hit something hard, but what part? Could it be a street? The sidewalk? Well, you could look at that flattened portion and tell by the abrasions that it had a smooth surface. It would have to be hard to crush the copper and lead jacketing. But what kind of a surface? And then go look to see if you can find that ricochet. Someone says, I was firing at them, but not trying to hit them. Well, in fact, the bullet did hit them. It hit the ground first and then passed through the body. You know, maybe looking at materials first, maybe it passed through an intermediate object. Like a shot fired through a window, passes through curtains, through a lampshade, through a sofa back, into a body. And you starts picking up all this material along the way. From a well-published author, Steve Martini. Has anybody ever read him, Steve Martini? He spoke at our conference one time and he said, you know, a lot of people don't want to read true crime. It's just too awful. Like hand rule, they don't want to read about true crime. But when they read my stories, no matter how gruesome they are, they know they're not true. So what I've done is, particularly in my first novel, Dark Side of Justice, the second one, and the third one I'm currently writing, is to take real cases and embellish them so that the reader knows, well, maybe they're not completely true. So I have in all my books inspired by real events. So people feel a little more comfortable. Sometimes they go, in the back of your mind, maybe it wasn't as bad as Raymond saying it is. Now, when I was a prosecution expert, we would be on a rotation and we would get called out, collect the physical evidence, take the photographs, do measurements. And the relationship of evidence to other evidence could be very important. That's why photographs are important. And that's why we never do chalk outlines. You know why we don't do chalk outlines? No? Because we have cameras. Why make a chalk outline? We click, click, click. So just to answer your question, it's usually people who are working for the prosecution that get called to scenes. But a vast number of criminalists today are not going to scenes. They're having CSI techs do that. By the way, there's a difference between a CSI expert and a criminalist. They could be one and the same, as I was, but most of them have a 2-year college degree and not much scientific training, but they're very good at documenting crime scenes, taking pictures, doing field tests for blood, lifting fingerprints, dusting for prints, but they don't do any analysis. And I think we're making a mistake there. because being at the scene is very important to get a sense of where this evidence is, the conditions, when it's being analyzed, and then the interpretation of that evidence is appropriate for that courtroom setting. So now cases are being more compartmentalized. In fact, you may have 6 or 7 criminals working one case, whereas in the olden days, we did everything. Whatever we collected, we would have to analyze. That's no longer the case. To take a case and solve it, a lot of times forensic scientists aren't involved in that matter. They get evidence, they analyze the evidence, they go and testify, they do their thing, and they're gone, rarely ever hearing the outcome. But as a defense expert, I got to be involved from the case from the very beginning to the final bell.